Welcome back to Draft Nights. I'm Ethan Mattingly, joined as always by Sam Montag. Sam, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm excited. Episode 2 should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to kick it right off into maybe one of the funniest stories I've seen in recent college football memory. So, the Oregon's QB coach was on a podcast recently, and he was getting asked interview questions, and this is what he said. This is the quote verbatim. Okay, he's talking about like what he says to QB prospects. He said, "I ask them a question like this all the time. Hey, do you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream? The moment a kid pauses, I don't really want that kid because you need to have some kind of conviction. If you sit there and you go, oh, coach, I don't know, what is this kid going to do on third down in front of 110,000 people? He's probably going to think about it more than he should." Like, I saw that, and, I just want to get your take on it first.
Okay, so for those watching, this is the first time I've heard of this. It seems a little aggressive. I'm just gonna throw it out there. First thought that went into my head was chocolate ice cream. So, just putting that out there, I didn't hesitate. But at the same time, it may be a bit much not to recruit a QB because they paused for the chocolate versus vanilla debate. That one seems a little unnecessary, but hey,
Yeah.
To each their own. Oregon seems to be doing just fine. Kudos to them, I guess. That's a strange one. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I feel like we see these stories about college football QBs having maybe more unorthodox training or recruiting approaches. Like last week, there was Texas Tech getting rid of all dumbbells over 40 pounds. You saw the Memphis coach that like banned music during practice. And then you got now like the Oregon's QB coach talking about chocolate and vanilla ice cream, and if you don't answer it in time, you can't play QB for Oregon. So I do see like a method to the madness where I get what he's saying, where if you can't make a decision quickly on something as simple as ice cream, how can you be expected to lead a team when the pressure is going to be way higher? But I don't know. I feel like there's much better ways to get this information.
I understand the idea that you're trying to narrow it down so much, and especially in the case of the Texas Tech weight, I just don't think it's smart. I mean, when you're getting rid of dumbbells that are under 40 pounds, that's just asking for injuries. And so, to each their own. Texas Tech also doing totally fine. So clearly something's working for them, but I just don't know if that's the one that you want to go with.
Texas Tech losing in the college football playoffs because their long snapper got injured trying to do rotator cuff exercises.
That's what I imagine is going to happen.
Dumbbells.
That's what I'm thinking. It's so easily avoidable. They also already have them. Like, are they just throwing them out or guess donating it? Like, it just seems unnecessary. But you know what? To each their own. Everything's bigger in Texas, I guess. So
including their dumbbells.
Just warm up with 40 pounds, I guess. I don't know. Kudos to them though. Strong dudes out there.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, the Oregon coach. I mean, again, they've had some great QBs in Oregon recently. Justin Herbert, Dante Moore's doing well up there. So I guess it's working. I mean, those guys have got some conviction.
It makes you wonder, like, what would they pick? Chocolate or vanilla ice cream for Dante Moore.
It's true. I feel like now we have to ask those guys.
These are the big questions that we have to ponder.
I feel like Herbert's a vanilla guy.
You think?
I think so.
I feel like he would be like a vanilla ice cream with gummy bears on it.
Yeah,
which just is a problem because you put the gummy bears in the ice cream, and then they get too hard. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not a gummies and ice cream guy.
He's always struck me as the very granola, very Oregon person. So
That's fair.
I think that.
I
but
mean, it doesn't change the fact that he's doing wonders for the Chargers.
he is that team's whole plan. They have nothing
Yeah.
else after him. The
Hey,
next story I
it's
wanted to
working.
go to, it feels like this is kind of always in the news when you talk college football. It's going to be Deion Sanders and things being not so great with Deion Sanders. Recently, we've started to see more and more former players speaking out, not directly against him, but saying some quotes that are more or less shots after transferring out. The three most recent ones: Jordan Seaton, who went to LSU, O lineman. You got the quarterback Ryan Staub, who went to Tennessee. I think did he go to I think Tennessee,
Yeah.
and then London Merritt, who the defensive lineman, and what they said in each of their quotes. So Seaton said that he appreciated the LSU work philosophy and the amount of effort that they were putting in. Ryan Staub said he loved the SEC culture and he liked how much more in-depth the coaching, more in-depth the coaching was for him and how much more insightful it was. And then London Merritt again talked about coaching and the facilities, but mainly emphasized the coaching. So while obviously not direct shots at Deion Sanders, we're seeing these people who leave cite coaching as the reason. And I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth noting that these SEC teams are going to have way more funding than a team like Colorado. And that's just kind of how it will be because of funding and because of larger schools. Big 12 teams are still, heavily funded, but at the same time, it just means more in the SEC. So, these LSU, these Tennessee programs, they're going to obviously have way more funding, and therefore the coaches and the coaching is just going to be that extra step. That being said, though, I think ever since the start, Deion has kind of had a slightly different mentality to coaching, which some have really liked and thrived under, and some have liked less. I'm excited. He's coming. Northwestern will be playing Colorado in Evanston next year, so I'm excited to see what happens then. Because I've never really focused on the full field defensive scheme or play style under Coach Prime, but I think that it'll be interesting. And in terms of the coaching, the facilities, I think that's more of a Colorado thing versus SEC rather than just a Deion Sanders type issue.
I agree with that. I think in a lot of ways, people in the typical sports media have been very quick to kind of put like a target on Coach Prime's back because, again, he's a big name. He's a very loud personality. You're always going to know his thoughts, and he's not the prototypical coach, like you said. However, that being said, I do think there is some validity to the amount of criticism and the amount of noise that has been coming out in recent times about his coaching philosophy and how people seem to not be on the same page with it a lot of the time.
Sure, and I think when you have a guy like Deion Sanders as your coach, it's going to be super easy to criticize him just from the start. But there is a point, I think, that you get to where you have to start, putting a little bit of value into all these critiques. The starting ones you could look at and be like, oh, they're hating on the guy that, terrorized my favorite team for so long. But when these critiques continue to happen, there is a point where you kind of have to start looking at them and valuing them a little bit and wondering if there is some validity behind them.
Mm-hmm. I guess we won't get the full picture until either Coach Prime is done with Colorado, moves on to other things, whether that's a step down or a step up, who's to say. But I'm excited to see in a couple years the Colorado documentary. But moving from one cornerback to the other, for today's episode, we wanted to focus on a player who wasn't going to go first overall, who it feels like everyone in the news is talking about. We wanted to go for a more, still a very high level player, someone who's been highly touted to go in the first round, but maybe not a top 10 pick. We're going to be talking about first team All ACC cornerback, brother of NFL star for the Falcons, AJ Terrell. We're talking about Avieon Terrell for Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's really kind of a hidden talent. He doesn't get a ton of publicity, like you said, but he's so fast, and you really could not ever sleep on this guy. If he's utilized correctly, he could be a dominant force in the NFL. We've seen it with his brother already. It kind of just runs in the family. And so I'm super excited to see what his NFL career looks like. And I'm excited to see if teams are able to really adequately use him. It's super easy to take a guy that's really good at a niche position and misuse him. But if he's used properly, then you're looking at a Pro Bowl defensive back.
Yeah. So a little bit of history from him. He was a 3-star prospect coming out of high school. He got multiple high-level offers just in his freshman year, notably from Kentucky and Georgia, and obviously Clemson, where he ended up going. In 2025, here are some of his counting stats. He put up 23 tackles, 5 forced fumbles, 5 pass breakups, 9 passes deflected, but one thing that we'll touch on later, he had 0 interceptions this past season. Going into a little bit more niche stats, the ones that don't show up just on the, strictly the counting box score. He was targeted 51 times over the course of the season, and he allowed 29 receptions. But even though that sounds like a lot for a typical high-level cornerback, there is some context that will make up for it. For example, only 4 of those receptions were over 10 yards. So a lot of very minimal gains over the course of the season. And he allowed 2 touchdowns, and he had 5 missed tackles, but at the same time, he had 4.5 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks. Now, that's a lot of numbers, just really, really rapidly. But the ones to really focus on, I think, right away, is that Avieon Terrell plays everywhere. He is not a strictly one-on-one cornerback that just plays on the outside that you see a lot. He likes to get into the backfield. He likes to attack the quarterback. That's how he got 3 sacks. He likes to come down on running backs and try to make a play. That's how he got 4.5 tackles for a loss. He's a heavy hitter. 5 forced fumbles for a DB is wild, no matter if that's a safety, and it's especially wild as a cornerback. He is someone who wants to get after the ball, and he's not afraid to get physical. However, something that we'll touch on later, the 2 touchdowns allowed and he had over 300 yards allowed receiving are not typical numbers of a first-round cornerback.
Yeah. I think, like you said, some positives and some weaknesses. The biggest ones that I also want to highlight are this past year he had 3 sacks. As a cornerback, you just don't see that very often. And so, like you said, this guy plays everywhere, and he really does. He's dominant everywhere on the field. Forcing 5 fumbles, he's forced 8 over his career, and producing 3 sacks for Clemson. That's just something that you don't get a lot of. But on the flip side, one of his drawbacks, like you said, he had a couple of missed tackles. And a large reason for that could be his size. He's not a huge dude. And because of that, he's only 5'11", 186. So NFL teams are definitely going to be questioning it a little bit when you're going up against a guy like Derrick Henry or big wide receivers in the NFL. That could be dangerous for a couple of cornerbacks. It's a little bit riskier, and it's something that clearly he's been able to adapt to as he's playing so fast. But at the same time, you do need to take that into consideration, and that's why I think you're not seeing him show up as your number, 1 through 10 type draft pick. He's looked at more late first round, early second round.
Yeah, starting into the film breakdown for Terrell, let's start off with, even though it feels a little bit unfair, just because it was brought up, let's talk about one of the drawbacks for his game, which is his size. Like you mentioned, only 5'11", but especially only 186 pounds. He is a light player. He is skinny. That doesn't mean that he's any less aggressive, but it is something to take into account. And the first one that I think should be taken into account is maybe his weaknesses against bigger wide receivers. There were a couple of times throughout his college career where, even though his technique is so solid, which we'll get into later, he was kind of just out physicaled by bigger wide receivers one-on-one on the side. Like, he'd get boxed out pretty easily because the wide receiver might just be 6'4" and like really strong, and they were just able to put a shoulder behind him and create enough space. Or because they're taller and because they might have a higher vertical, they could high point the ball and he's not even able to get into that position. And that's only talking about maybe a weakness against the pass. Like you mentioned, against the run, when it might be fine against college players where you're able to maybe get an arm tackle or maybe just get a shoestring tackle or just try to bump them enough that your teammate can get a tackle. In the NFL, a bigger running back or a bigger running quarterback who, when you send Avieon Terrell into the backfield to try to take them out, they might be able to just simply muscle him away. And then that really limits one of his biggest strengths coming out of college.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, he doesn't allow a lot of deep passes, which is really key for him because it is those open areas where he struggles the most. So if he can limit those plays, then obviously he's still going to be an incredible talent for any NFL team. But the question is going to be, will his play really translate to the NFL? So obviously in college, you're going to be able to keep wide receivers more contained, keep them closer to the line of scrimmage. But once you get into the NFL, you're playing against bigger wide receivers who can adapt on the fly as well. And that's going to be the biggest thing because Terrell is super good in coverage, but he's a little bit more reactive than proactive. And because of that, it's going to be a little bit easier for these big wide receivers to read the coverage and be able to adapt their routes based on what they see. And the talent level at the NFL is just at the level at this point where, teams are going to be able to utilize Terrell however they want to use him. And so while he's quick and he's physical and he keeps the play moving, he definitely needs to be wary of his size. And if he's going to keep wide receivers contained, then he's going to need to kind of adapt his play style a little bit.
Yeah, I think his size is the only reason I wouldn't put him as the cornerback 1 on the board, because typically when you spend first round capital on a cornerback, you're expecting someone that can lock down the outside against any wide receiver 1 in the league. You look at Pat Surtain. You look at a Christian Gonzalez. You look down the list, a Sauce Gardner. They're generally bigger guys. They're 6'2 plus. They're 200 plus pounds, while still having the speed and the technique to keep up with an AJ Brown and go down the list of the bigger wide receivers who can really high point the ball. That's where I get a little bit more nervous for Terrell, because if a team who's really cornerback desperate drafts him thinking that he's going to be their shutdown outside cornerback, that's not what his play style goes towards. He's meant to be more versatile and used all over the field. Because if he gets put, again, one-on-one with an A.J. Brown and just expected to hold that up as either a rookie or even down the line, he's not to disrespect, he might get a couple of good plays on him, but that's not a good matchup for him. And that's where his size can really be a detriment both to his draft stock and to his versatility in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, we talked last week about how Mendoza's going to have to adapt to taking the ball under center. And those are things that take time. Every rookie's going to take a little bit of time getting adapted into the league. But I think one of the super interesting parts about Terrell is going to be that how he adapts is going to entirely determine how he plays. So in for a player like Fernando Mendoza, he's going to be able to kind of adapt his game, but simultaneously be able to kind of change his team's play style so that they form around him rather than just him conforming to them. For Terrell, it's going to be the complete opposite. Either he adapts with the play style, or he's going to just get left behind. And so, yes, when you say, you're a first-round cornerback is expected to be CB1, I think that Terrell has that potential, but I also think that it's going to be entirely a question of how well does he adapt early in the season, how well does he quickly adapt against these big wide receivers, and that's going to be something that you're able to tell very early on. I don't think that's going to take a while to figure out.
Yeah, I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on this, because I think a lot of it's going to come down to coaching. If the coaches go into the season expecting him to be able to be the shutdown, I don't think that's using him to his full potential. You have to, if you're a coach in the NFL, you have to be able to adapt your schemes to the players that you get and to the talent that you have. And if you have a cornerback who's able to play all over the field, which we'll get to in a second, why would you force him into a role that maybe he is not going to be as valuable in, that maybe he'll let up more big plays to the offense in, rather than being a true disruptor nickel or slot cornerback that you could see him being?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that point. A little bit where I kind of differ from you is that I think that it's really easy to look at this style of coaching or this level of coaching, I should say, and think, they'll immediately adapt their defensive schemes to how Terrell plays. But you also have to remember that these coaches have been doing this for so long that it is likely, eventually they might shift over. For the start, my bet is that they will try and kind of enforce their play style on him. If he ends up being the talent that I think he has the potential to be, then yes, it would be natural for a coach to kind of shift the play style towards him. But for right now, having a rookie that doesn't have a lot of experience, it's very easy, I feel like, for a coach to say, all right, you're going to do it my way first. If that doesn't work, we'll do it your way. And I think that when we start seeing coach kind of try and instill that play style in a cornerback, especially a cornerback, that's when you're going to see whether the player is successful or not. And that's why I think that certain teams will take him or not. Because, as we'll talk about later, there are certain teams where their current play styles are very similar to Terrell's playing style. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where he goes, in the sense that there are chances that he won't have to adapt at all.
Yeah. So I feel like now spent enough time talking about his major downside, which is, again, his size. So let's go into some of the real positives into why he is pretty unanimously a first-round grade. And I want to just talk about, we've mentioned enough just in passing, his versatility. Some quick stats: he played 110 snaps at slot cornerback and 463 snaps in the wide position. So he is not shoe-in, just have to be an outside cornerback. He is able to play and contain those slot cornerbacks. I think that's personally why we saw his number of yards allowed and his number of receptions allowed go up, because when you're guarding slot cornerbacks, they're expected to make those quick pass catches but not let up huge yardage, which is what the stats reflect. So he's able to contain these quick, smaller wide receivers because of just how versatile he is. He is fast, he is fluid, and his technique is absurdly good. There's a clip, if you go onto his personal TikTok and you pull up, there's a video, it has tons of views already, of him in practice, practicing one-on-one reps. If you just watch how cleanly he moves from flipping his hips into a back pedal against moves from a wide receiver, it is absurd. It looks like he knows what the wide receiver is going to do before he does it. His ability to watch the wide receiver's hips and somehow watch the QB's eyes at the same time is absolutely NFL level.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about his ability downfield. I'm going to switch it up and say that his pass rush is out of this world. He has a 94.1 pass rush grade, and for a cornerback to have that, that is just nuts. We talk about, how versatile he is, but genuinely this guy can play the entire defensive scheme. He has 0 interceptions, like we said a little bit earlier, but he has 9 pass breakups, so definitely still a competent pass defender, as well as, like you said, ensuring not a lot of big plays for offenses. But at the same time, 5 forced fumbles is nuts. 3 sacks as a cornerback is incredible. This guy, like you said, so fast. And the ability to kind of have that talent on your team where you can shift him and morph him. And we talked about how, he'll have to adapt to a play style. But the fact that he can adapt to a play style, and I have full faith that he's going to be the type of guy that can really play in any scheme that he's put into, that's just such an asset for him, and such an asset for a rookie that's coming in where teams are looking to see how can we best utilize this guy. This guy can be utilized however they want. And so to have that as such a young cornerback, that's just incredible for him. And yeah, some mock drafts will have him early second rounds. I think this guy is a first round talent.
And we mentioned like a young player. He is a true junior. He started his freshman year. He played all of his sophomore year, and he played all of his junior year before going to the draft. He has never transferred. He did not redshirt. He is 21 years old. Of the top cornerbacks, he is the youngest one. And what we're seeing is he's not afraid to tackle. And that's something that is not a given for cornerbacks. There's a great, I don't want to say great, maybe a more infamous quote from Sauce Gardner where he said, if your cornerback has a lot of tackles, that means your team is bad. And I disagree with that. I think for maybe his type of cornerback, that might be true. But it's also showing that Avieon Terrell, when the play goes towards him, if a wide receiver gets the ball or if a running back is coming towards him, he's not afraid of contact, which you can see from a lot of cornerbacks. He's ready to just get his nose in, and he is going to try to, A, get the ball, like you saw with the 5 forced fumbles, or B, he is going to put his body on the line to take them out. And that's a motor and that's an energy that you just can't teach. You can't coach aggression. You can't coach like passion. And he really has it. He wants to make an impact play. And that type of player thrives in the NFL recently. Stephon Gilmore back in 2019. Devin Witherspoon on the Seahawks this past season. Those guys who are able to fly downfield, even at the cornerback position, and make tackles while also holding their own or being locked down one-on-one or in zone that is an asset for a team that is really hard to come by.
Yeah, I mean, he just pounces on the ball, and that's what you need in the NFL. You need kind of that hunger, and he's got it. And so, yeah, like you said, the Sauce Gardner quote, Sauce Gardner also doesn't, typically pass rush. And so because of that, naturally he's going to have, a few less tackles. And when he does make a tackle, chances are the offense just gains some yards. For Terrell, he wants the tackles, and he's going after them, and he's tackling for a loss, and he's getting sacks, and he's going after the ball. And, you say that you can't teach aggression, but you really are it's something that you're born with, and he's born with it. His brother's shown it in the NFL already, so if you're wondering, is this just a fluke? It's not. It genuinely does run in the family. This guy is going to work as hard as he can. He's going to work his butt off time and time again. And realistically, that's exactly what you need. That's a coachable player, because you can teach a guy how to gain 20 pounds. If he needs to gain weight, he will. If he needs to, learn a different play style, he will. But to have that hunger going in, that's something that's just going to be such an asset for him.
And also, speaking on his brother, because it kind of goes without saying, A.J. Terrell, again for the Falcons, one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL. their play style is not really similar, which I feel like it kind of gets lost on people when they make the comparison. AJ Terrell is the more prototypical one-on-one, outside, man-to-man cornerback that you just put him on and just shut down that side of the field. That's what he's good at. Does he get tackles? Yes, but he's not going into the backfield to make a play. Also, he's on the bigger side. He's like 6'2", he's 30 pounds. He is a big player, and he is able to be more physical with wide receivers in a way that his younger brother isn't. And even though that might sound like, oh, this is totally pro AJ Terrell is like easily the better prospect, that's not entirely true yet because of how much more versatile his younger brother is. And again, I just want to harp on the technique. I just want to really take an extra second to emphasize. I think if Avieon Terrell was maybe 2 or 3 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier, he would be the consensus cornerback 1 in this class, easily. His technique is better than any of the other prospects, in my opinion, and his ability to mirror wide receivers at such a quick pace, his ability to his recovery speed, especially downhill or on inside routes, is one of one for in this class. He's just he's just a baller, man. He's just someone who like you just want on your team.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about AJ Terrell, I'm gonna fact check you real quick. He weighs 200 pounds, so
my fault.
He's not a massive dude. When he was at Clemson, he weighed 190. So in that sense, I genuinely think that's where you're gonna see that adaptation. Players are going to get bigger in the NFL, and also Avieon is only 21 years old. Mm-hmm. You're not even done growing at that point. It's probably going to be another 3 or 4 years until he's reached his full size. And even then, with the types of nutrition and strength conditioning that NFL teams have, you really can just adapt your weight however you want to once you've made it to the NFL. But I think that their play styles were different, yes, in the sense that AJ was a slightly more traditional cornerback, kind of stayed back one-on-one. But I think where they really differed and where I think Avieon has a lot more potential, honestly, is that he goes after the ball so much more. And so while AJ had a few more interceptions for sure, he doesn't have as many forced fumbles. And while I think that, obviously interceptions are going to be key for any cornerback, naturally, forced fumbles are the type of thing where you can't really teach that. What's up, Ethan's roommate? AJ, for a cornerback trying to make an interception, that's kind of just something that you're naturally going to do. A cornerback should be able to catch a ball, and so that will naturally come. But a forced fumble is the type of thing where you have to learn the right way to tackle and the right way to be pulling at the ball in a certain angle to make that happen. So for a player like Avieon to have 5 forced fumbles, that's just nuts. And AJ had 1. That's already pretty impressive for a cornerback. 5 is unheard of.
Do you think the 5 forced fumbles is more impressive than a cornerback prospect maybe coming into the NFL having a 3 interception season?
I have to say yes, because AJ Terrell did have a 3 interception season, and I did just say that Avieon has more potential. But I think yes, even more so because when you look at Avieon Terrell's stats, he had 9 pass breakups. A pass breakup is about as close as you can get to an interception without the interception. And realistically, that's something that can be worked on, I think. That's just going after the ball a little bit more when it's in the air versus what he's doing right now, which is going after the ball when making a tackle. That's definitely kind of a shift in how he's going to be utilized. But at the same time, it's worth noting Avieon only really allows short passes. So it's a lot harder to force an interception, especially as a smaller guy, in those short completions. So the fact that he's still causing these forced fumbles means he's getting in there. He's kind of getting aggressive, getting dirty. He's using all of his physicality to his advantage. If you're not able to really like defend or to create an interception on a short pass, that's one thing. That's more of a middle linebacker type ability. But for a cornerback to be able to then adapt and force a fumble, I think that just shows so much potential. You're naturally going to get the interceptions on deep passes, but to create a turnover on the short completions, that's where he's going to be. That's where his biggest asset is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Pointing out like how much he's really only been targeted in the short yardage. That's not typically where you see cornerbacks getting their interception. You see that more in the mid to long range passes. But I think it's time to move on to some of the NFL teams that might be looking to draft Avieon Terrell. So this is going to be a little bit different than last week because Mendoza, there was only really one team that's going to draft him. Avieon Terrell, there's been mock drafts that have had him going as early as 20 to those who have had him like going closer to the 32nd pick. So there's a lot of teams that could use a cornerback, especially a versatile one, that we could see wanting to draft Avieon.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in terms of Fernando Mendoza, I guess technically he could not go to the Raiders, so we shouldn't throw that out completely. But if he doesn't go to the Raiders,
that'll definitely happen. Yeah,
the Raiders have messed up majorly. Anyway,
yeah.
Moving on to Terrell. You say that you've seen him as late as 32. I'm looking at one right now that has him going 40 overall.
40?
I think that's very aggressive, but nonetheless, it is. He's being placed up and down. So clearly, different analysts see him going in different areas. And while that's reasonable, it is also worth looking at the teams that he'd be drafted by. So in this one where he's going 40, he's going to the Chiefs. It doesn't make a ton of sense. The Chiefs aren't super in the market right now for a player with Terrell's type of play style.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that is going to be kind of how he's viewed. I've broken it down to a few teams that I really think he's going to work well with. The Seahawks, I think, just makes sense for Avieon Terrell.
We want to start out with the big one?
I would love to. Because realistically,
I'm in.
They're in a good spot to pick him draft-wise. So, in terms of their order, it does make sense for them to go after him. But also, there is very little that they have to do to change their play style to really work in Terrell. And so, I think for that, they're typically cover 3 or zone heavy. That's going to be the type of thing that Terrell thrives in. And I think that just their play style really matches him. It makes sense, and
it does.
The
it does.
The Seahawks are the type of team. The Seahawks just make sense. They're the type of team where it would work.
I mean, the Seahawks use their cornerbacks and their nickels for blitzes and for run plays more than I think any other team in the NFL. They love their versatile cornerbacks. Look at particularly immediately Devon Witherspoon. Devon Witherspoon is one of the most unique cornerback prospects, considering that they drafted a nickel cornerback at 4th overall, pretty much. That's not where you see that type of cornerback go. And look, they just won the Super Bowl, and he was arguably in the running for Super Bowl MVP. He's been a Pro Bowler every season that he's been in the league. He is one of the top cornerbacks, and yet he's not the prototypical one-on-one. I think Avieon Terrell under Mike McDonald is the dream situation for him. Being able to run into the backfield and just cause chaos, being able to sit in zone, which we didn't even mention. He's probably the best zone defender of all the cornerbacks so far in this draft. And being able to really just play all over the field, that just plays perfectly to his strengths.
I mean, really the biggest reason, or the biggest argument that you can make for why the Seahawks shouldn't take him would be his size. And I think personally, there isn't really a team that's going to want a 5'11", 186 cornerback that much. So you could make that argument for any team, and for any other reason, you look at the Seahawks and you say that they're a perfect fit. I mean, it just makes sense for them.
We keep saying it, but it just makes sense.
It really does. That being said, though, they're still later in the draft, so it does still make sense for them to go, or for him to go to a couple of different places. I'm thinking about teams like the Cowboys, where the Cowboys pass rush currently is last in the league.
Not pass rush.
Sorry, not pass rush. Pass defense, or their backfield. My apologies. But
no, you're good.
They need a player like Terrell right now. So would it make sense for him to go there? Of course it would. He could be a huge asset, and while they need to mold him a little bit more, Dallas needs a couple of cornerbacks right now.
Yeah, Dallas. I just looked it up. Dallas allowed 266 passing yards per game. That is dead last in the NFL. They allowed 35 passing touchdowns over the course of the season. This is a team that desperately needs cornerback and DB help. But the thing for me, and I don't know if this is a hot take, I think Dallas would be the worst place to send Avieon Terrell. I think Avieon Terrell and the Cowboys would both suffer for it. Now, this is not saying it's a guaranteed he would be bad for them. I'm not saying that at all. But what Dallas is probably going to look for if they draft him is they're going to look for that shutdown one-on-one cornerback, because they have been getting lit up by the best wide receivers in the league this past season. Again, in the same division, an A.J. Brown or a Devontae Smith. And that's not what Avieon Terrell's game is. That's not what he's the best at. That's not why he would be a first-round prospect. So I think going into a team like Dallas, where the infrastructure in the DB room is just all over the place. Their highest-graded defensive back was Deron Bland, who, sure, he gets a lot of picks. He had the incredible 6-pick-6 season, but he's not a shutdown corner. He's been absolutely torched many plays by better wide receivers. If they send him there, if Dallas picks him, I just think he's not going to be their savior.
Yeah, I totally agree with your analysis of how they would use him. And I think that that's one of those things where you're looking a lot more at the opponent, and in that sense, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That division itself just has a lot of big wide receivers. You think about it, even like a player like Malik Neighbors is a bigger guy. So yeah, in that division itself, I'm not sure it would make a lot of sense. That being said, they need defensive players. So while I agree with your idea that, maybe it's not the best place for him, the Cowboys are going to need to find some defensive players, and they're going to need to find them fast.
I think with how big the market in Dallas is and how much media attention there's going to be, I think that's going to be unnecessary pressure on a young cornerback who is going to be asked a lot. There's going to be a lot asked of him. I mean, look at, again, his brother, A.J. Terrell, taken 14th overall by the Falcons. He struggled a lot his first season. He was like a very scrutinized player, and that's in the Atlanta market during a rebuilding year when there was not a lot of national attention on us and on A.J. Terrell. So going to Dallas, being expected to immediately be their cornerback one, being able to guard a Malik Neighbors and A.J. Brown, I just don't think that's conductive to A, winning for the Cowboys, or B, development for Avieon.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree with that point. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he were to be taken there, how they would use him and how they would try and adapt him in. Because either he would have to adapt or the Cowboys would have to adapt. So it'll be strange to see if they were to take him, how they'll use him. And then finally, a team that doesn't get a lot of attention in terms of Avieon Terrell, but I think the Vikings would be a really interesting pick for him. And I think that because they're really big on that disguise-heavy defense, and that's the exact play style that Terrell has. When he's blitzing so often, I think that could make a lot of sense. And while it doesn't immediately make sense, and also they're a little high in the draft order, they're sitting, I believe it's 18.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little high, but I feel like it's the type of thing that could make sense. They're in need of a cornerback right now. And I think that it could be a good move for Minnesota to take a new young cornerback, kind of take the place in defensive backs of Harrison Smith, and kind of bring that team back defensively.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, yeah, Minnesota would probably be a good spot for him development-wise for the same reason the Seahawks would be. You got Brian Flores there, loves to, like you said, disguise coverages, send people blitzing, especially cornerbacks, especially safeties. But at the same time, I'm wondering, would they use him like that at full time, or would they lean more into the situation like I mentioned, Dallas? Because again, they need a cornerback, and you said the Vikings are going in the what pick did you say that they had?
I think they're 18
in NFL draft. So they're the 18th pick. So why, in that case, why would they maybe not go for one of the other cornerback prospects who are maybe being like touted a little bit higher? Like for example, a Delane out of LSU, or a Gerard McCoy out of Tennessee. Like those guys are being mocked. I mean, Delane is being mocked inside the top 10 in some cases, and McCoy is more mocked in the mid first round. Those guys, I'm not saying that they're strictly better than Avieon Terrell, because I think Avieon Terrell has been a little bit more underrated. But if you're Minnesota and you're pretty desperately in need of that true cornerback, that true shutdown outside, wouldn't you maybe want to go towards a McCoy in that sense?
So the argument I'd make for that, I think, is that I think because of how young Terrell is, he has really high potential. And he's basically still in diapers when it'll come to the NFL. So, I think that his potential is so high that it is going to be a high risk, high reward type situation. But if that pays off, then the Vikings are looking at a new cornerback who could be dominant for 10 plus years. And so the idea that you could just lock that all down right now, especially when you're in need of one, that could be incredibly appealing to really any team. Obviously, the other corners a little bit more appealing in terms of just how set they are, but in my personal opinion, I think Terrell's potential is so high, and we really still don't know exactly what he can do. We just know that he's really aggressive and he plays super physical, both things that you want on your team. So I would say that in that sense, well, maybe it's a little bit overly risky and it's super easy for me to say, sitting in my dorm room with absolutely no one counting on me. I would say sometimes taking that risk is worth it. And if it were to pay off, which I have a gut feeling it will, then that could just pay off massive dividends for the Vikings in the future.
That's a really good point that I hadn't thought about before that you made about Terrell, because of his position and because of how he plays the cornerback position. It is very conductive to have a longer career than you see those typical outside cornerbacks have. It's pretty well known, once the legs go for those outside guys, they're a lot less effective, and the drop off in age for the true CB1s of the NFL is very fast. However, you look at the more nickel and versatile cornerbacks like a Marlon Humphrey on the on the Ravens, who's now in his mid 30s and still making all pro teams. That's pretty enticing. You have to look at the long-term value for your team.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the Vikings are a type of team that already do that. We mentioned Smith a little bit earlier. they're a team that's had that type of development in the past, and it's worked really well for them. And so, if they're looking to just kind of repeat that same success, I think Terrell's your guy. If they're looking for, a shorter stint from different cornerbacks where they can kind of keep it moving, keep them kind of going in and out a little bit faster, but also find that same type of success, then yeah, they probably should go for a different type of cornerback like Delaney.
Mm-hmm. The last team that I think we should mention, very similar situation to the Cowboys, but I think a little bit better infrastructure, is the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins were the 31st ranked pass defense, so just one ahead of the Cowboys. Just two peas in a pod right at the bottom. But what they have that the Cowboys don't is they have a former All-Pro safety, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's sitting back there. A player known for his physicality, who's a little bit more on the smaller side, you could say, for a lot of DBs, especially for safeties. Do you think having a player like Minkah Fitzpatrick there in the secondary really would that maybe help out Avieon Terrell when he's maybe being expected to be the cornerback 1 or 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime that you're going to have a former All-Pro kind of as your mentor, if you will, that's going to be massively helpful for any young player. I mean, we even talked about it with Fernando Mendoza and Kirk Cousins last week. That's just going to be helpful for any team. And like you said, the Dolphins are also in desperate need of a new cornerback. Their defense was, just put simply, abysmal last year.
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, that could be a massive asset. At the same time, I think most teams are going to have that type of mentorship to some degree. So yes, Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously a little bit higher, more highly regarded. But at the same time, every team has veterans. Every team is going to be able to raise their rookies and kind of show them the ropes.
Mm-hmm.
While Fitzpatrick's play style is a little bit closer to Terrell, so it would make a little bit more sense. I'm not sure if the other factors really make sense. So the Dolphins, their draft pick their position in the draft doesn't make as much sense for Terrell. It would be a little bit more difficult for them. So that's the reason why I would say he likely won't go to Miami. But that being said, your point about the mentorship of Fitzpatrick makes total sense. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it is arguable that unlike the Cowboys, Seahawks, and Vikings, the Dolphins have a lot more needs maybe than cornerback. Like, they just traded their entire wide receiver room. Their O-line was not good. They seriously need help in pass rush. Like, you can go down the list. All due respect to the Miami front office and all due respect to the Dolphins, they pretty much need help everywhere. There's not a position group on that team that I look at and I just go, wow, I'm really confident in those guys. They are top of the line in this league. So maybe taking, I don't want to say a reach, but maybe taking a risk on a smaller cornerback who isn't like really expected to be that lockdown one-on-one guy, probably not in the needs that the Dolphins would have. However, I still think that we could see them going for some help in the secondary. And, if Avieon drops into the second round, like some mock drafts are suggesting, we could see a Terrell brother in Miami.
It would be interesting for sure. And yeah, I do think that it would be a second round pick. But that being said, it would be an interesting pick, and it's kind of risky for sure, but the Dolphins really have nothing to lose right now. So if you're going to take a risk,
true.
Now's the time to do it.
That is very true. Yeah, again, not to disrespect, but expectations in Miami are fairly low right now. It's very clear they're headed towards total rebuild. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent Waddle to Denver, and they picked up Malik Willis out of Green Bay. So we'll see how that goes for the team overall. But Man, it's been a very eventful offseason for the Dolphins.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go. They could really take this draft in any direction, and
Yeah.
you would assume that it will help them in some way or another.
You'd hope. I think for the final little minutes of time that we have, I want to talk about maybe Avieon Terrell's future in the NFL. What we could see from him going forward. What do you think would be the floor, the ceiling, and somewhere in between?
Yeah, I think Terrell is one of those interesting players who has such a high ceiling and such a low floor. In terms of what team he stays at, that's a little bit different. I'll mention that quickly. That'll entirely depend, I think, on where he gets drafted. I think if he goes to Minnesota, he could be in Minnesota for his entire career. But I think, if he goes to a place like Dallas, it's more likely that he'll get transitioned in and out. That being said, I think that his potential is through the roof, just because of how aggressive he is always. But because he's also so aggressive and a little bit smaller, that means injury potential is definitely a little bit higher, and there is a chance that his play style just doesn't really adapt to the NFL that well, in which case his floor is very low. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how he kind of forms to the NFL. It's interesting, I think, because especially we talked about Mendoza last week. He was pretty straightforward. We're pretty sure we'll know how that one will turn out. But when you take a guy like Terrell, it literally is the exact opposite side of the spectrum. He's really the type of guy where it could be so good or so bad, in my opinion. And so it'll be interesting to see, how he adapts. And I personally think he's going to adapt really well. I think that we saw that with his brother, that he just kind of naturally comes into the league and he kind of has his own play style, but it forms and it does well. But on the flip side of that, if it goes poorly, it could go all off the rails very quickly.
Yeah. I think also having a brother in the NFL probably is a very big boon for him, because maybe the shock of the NFL, the shock of going to the next level, sure, it won't be totally gone, but it might be lightened because you have an older brother who's there to help him out and tell him what to expect. Especially considering AJ Terrell did not have a very smooth start to the NFL. Like I mentioned, as much as I love him as a player on my team, his first season he was bad. He was not good that first season. And then the second season, he was all-pro second team. So, got to have a lot of patience here. I think trying to maybe be a little bit more concrete with his floor and ceiling. I think his floor could very easily be a rotational cornerback. And this is not being disrespectful to Avieon Terrell. I think it's just when you're a smaller guy whose skills lean more towards being a nickel cornerback or a slot cornerback rather than being a true cornerback one on the outside, that limits how much teams are willing to invest both coaching capital and time into your development. It's pretty much when you get onto the field, can you be an instant impact or can you not? Because you're 5'11", you're 180 pounds. If you're not able to bulk up, if you're not able to stop running backs consistently, if you're not able to shut down the middle of the field passing game, your skills are kind of just not needed and a little bit obsolete. Now, on the flip side, I think his ceiling, easily Devon Witherspoon level. His aggression, if he puts on 20 plus pounds and he's able to keep his speed and fluidity, you can see someone who will lock down slot cornerbacks, who can be put on the outside on an island and win reps when he's needed to, and someone who can get into the backfield and cause consistent chaos. Either whether it's in Seattle, whether it's in Minnesota, doesn't matter. He has that skill type, and if coaches are willing to invest in improving that and really mold their schemes maybe to fit in a player like Avieon Terrell, you could see him being an instant impact year one, similar to how Nick Emenware was for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see kind of how his play style develops, and like you said, after that first season especially. because all players are going to take about a year to get used to it. So, with patience, I wonder where he will end up because my hopes for him are very high.
Yeah.
And I really do think that he can be a franchise player for some teams.
Absolutely. All right. That's about all the thoughts I have on Avieon Terrell and the rest of recent college football news. How about you?
I think I'm all good for this week. It was a good one.
All right, lovely. All right, thank you all for listening. If you've made it to this point, please leave a rating. Please follow us. Please all the good stuff. We're really trying to build something here. We hope you enjoyed our analysis, and we will catch you next week.